Welcome to Boundless Cosmic Tales. Many monkeys and apes contributed to helping us explore the final frontier. Our biological cousins helped us learn the effects of space on mammals. And while these animals played a crucial role in advancing space research, many sacrificed their lives for the betterment of space exploration. In the early days of space exploration, we didn't have any idea what space was like. Many scientists theorized that gravity was the glue that kept us mentally sane and physically functional. So, they first sent fruit flies in 1947. They returned to us unharmed and without any strange mutations. Then they sent the first animals into space, and they needed to test more complex biological systems. These apes were the first real astronauts. They needed to do physiological examinations and undergo training to endure space conditions and perform physical tasks like pulling levers. Without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And we owe that to their unwitting sacrifice. Here are some of the apes that helped us explore space. The Albert monkeys were the first mammals to reach the upper atmosphere and eventually into space. In 1948, the United States began the first series of missions involving monkeys. These poor animals were the first to be tested, the Albert series, named after the rhesus monkeys chosen for the experiments. These missions used German V-2 rockets to study biological impacts on space travel. Albert I was the first primate sent to space. Sadly, he didn't survive, suffocating during the flight. Albert II reached space in 1949, traveling 83 miles above Earth. But his mission ended in tragedy when the parachute failed during re-entry. Subsequent flights with Albert III and IV faced similar issues, but they provided important data on the bodily effects of space travel. These early Albert tests were horrible and cruel, and they didn't get much attention until 1951. A monkey named Yorick and his fellow crewmates of 11 mice returned from a successful spaceflight over 236,000 feet above the Earth, over Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The world started to realize that these tests could be done safely. And Yorick got a lot of press as the first monkey to live through a spaceflight. Another event that got so much attention, in 1957, Laika, the first animal to orbit in space, died because the mission had no plan to return the dog safely to Earth. There was outrage around the world from animal rights groups. Afterwards, attempts were made to return animals safely from orbit, but that didn't always go to plan. Gordo, a little squirrel monkey, boarded a Jupiter AM-13 rocket. His mission was to test the effects of weightlessness on small primates. Gordo's flight reached an impressive altitude of over 300 miles. Finally, it looked like these test flights were going well, until a parachute failure led to his capsule being lost in the ocean and was never found. Gordo's mission showed both the promise and perils of early space experiments. Returning from space can be just as tricky as going up. Meet the cutest space couple around. Sam and Miss Sam, two rhesus monkeys, took part in the Mercury program, the program that paved the way for Apollo. These missions tested escape systems and life support equipment for human astronauts. Both monkeys successfully completed their flights and returned safely, demonstrating that these systems were ready for human use. And most importantly, returned these spacefaring lovers back down to Earth. After Sam, we meet Ham in 1961, possibly the most famous space monkey. This chimpanzee became the first primate to perform tasks in space. Ham was not just a passenger, but an active participant in the mission. He was trained to perform tasks like pressing levers in response to flashing lights and sounds, simulating actions that human astronauts would later perform. His ability to perform these tasks under the stresses of spaceflight demonstrated that cognitive and motor functions could be maintained in a microgravity environment. In the pre-human era of spaceflight, it was theorized that low gravity would kill or completely disable astronauts. But Ham and others like him proved otherwise. He returned a hero and became an icon of the US space program. In the early 60s, he was the very face of NASA, and things were looking up. Similarly, Enos became the first chimp to orbit the Earth that same year. His test was very important. It was the test flight before John Glenn would orbit the Earth, but this time there was trouble. The mission had only 3 orbits planned, but there was a malfunction on the thruster. Flight controllers were forced to terminate Enos's flight after 2 orbits, and he landed in the recovery area and was picked up after splashdown. Despite the issue, Enos performed his task flawlessly, and John Glenn got his shot just a few months later. And lastly, Bonnie. In 1969, NASA was testing the effects on biological organisms in their series called Biosatellite. On the 3rd mission, they sent up Bonnie, a small, pig-tailed monkey, to measure the effects of cardiovascular health, brain states, and electrolyte imbalances. Terribly, Bonnie had a heart attack and the mission was terminated. This put an end to the study of mammals, besides ourselves, in space. There were a few more tests done by Roscosmos, but the testing of mammals was no longer the focus of space missions. While their journeys were filled with scientific triumphs, many of these primates paid the ultimate price. Their sacrifices were instrumental in developing life support systems, escape technologies, and an understanding of how living beings adapt to space. They had no choice in accepting these missions. And much of these animal experiments were considered a cheap shortcut to other methods that could have produced similar results. But many scientists regretted the work they did, and the animals could have been treated better. These tests were a dark period in the early days of space travel, but now we have moved beyond these cruel methods. And thankfully, we have transitioned to testing ourselves. We will remember these great apes and their contributions as creatures of the Earth, together, exploring the stars.